Welcome to Cans of Corn. Today,
Not yet. Not yet going.
reload
Yes,
file.
okay, yeah, it's on.
Welcome
Okay.
to Cans of Corn. We're on today.
Not yet.
This is all very confusing. I'm Corn. Of course, this is confusing. Today we got a guest. This is Sally or Uyen. Sally, please, would you introduce yourself?
Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Uyen Ly. You can call me Sally Mill, and I'm a researcher, translator, and educator based in Ho Chi Minh City. My focus is on feminism, Marxism, and the politics of social reproduction. I'm very happy and honored to be the first speaker of the Coin podcast. This project is really close to my heart, in a space where we can connect theory with everyday life and where women's voices and struggle can be shared, understood, and celebrated.
Couldn't have said it
Okay.
better. That was excellent. Thank you. So, what you got for us today? I've heard we are talking about witches. Witches?
Okay.
Oh my
The
God,
witches. Yes.
witches.
Okay. So, in today's episode, I will be talking about Sylvia Federici' work, The Witch and the Women, and how her ideas still speak powerfully to represent from capitalism beginnings to the global conditions of women today. Thank you so much for joining me. So, are you ready?
Hmm. Of course we're ready. Waiting for this all day.
Okay, then let's do it. Okay. In Marxism, there are not only theories and equations, but also metaphors, vivid, haunting images that help us see how capitalism really works. One of the most famous metaphor appears in Das Kapital in 1867, where Karl Marx describes capital as a vampire, that labor that lives only by sucking living labor and lives the more it sucks. This is some kind of German thing. So through this image, Marx shows that capitalism survives by training the life and energy of the workers. It is not alive by itself, but parasitically feeds on human labor. A century later, Silvia Federici, a Marxist feminist theorist, continued this tradition of using metaphor to expose hidden forms of exploitation in her work, which I'm going to talk about today, Caliban and the Witch, the version 2004, she replaces the vampire with another figure, the witch. For Federici, the witch represent women whose body and reproductive power were disciplined, controlled, and sacrificed to make capitalist accumulation possible. From Karl vampire to Federici witch, both metaphors tell us the same truth that capitalism is not only an economic system, but a process that feeds on human life, on our labor, our bodies, and our time. Look at some of the photo here about a witch. When we talk about the witches, the media often shows an image of an ugly, evil woman with dark magic and a black cat by her side. But must a witch always be a woman? And does she really look like that? What is the true story behind the figure of the witch? Why is the witch so often imagined as female? The barbaric witch hunts that killed more than 10,000 women across Europe were not simply caused by superstitions or hatreds of women, but were deeply connected to the division of labor and gender in society. We will explore these questions through the feminist theorist Silvia Federici and her influential work Caliban and the Witch, the women, the body, and primitive accumulation. So let me talk a little bit about Federici. Throughout her life, Sylvia Federici devoted much of her research to understanding women's position through a Marxist feminist lens. When she spoke about rights for housework, she did not mean that domestic work should be absorbed into capitalist system or further exploited by it. Rather, by rights, she meant that such work should be recognized as labor, not as an act of love or a woman's natural duty. Federici is best known for her work Wages Against Housework in 1974, in which she argues that housework is unpaid labor. In that movement, her collective demanded payment for all forms of reproductive work, including housework, family care, child care, and domestic labor in general. This is some of the photo from the strike, how wages for housework, and this is her famous work, Wages Against Housework. So I'm going to talk about Caliban and the Witch today. Um, this book is a Marxist feminist reinterpretations of history that explore how women bodies and labor were shaped under capitalism. Before we go into Federici's ideas, let's look at where the title come from. This is Caliban, Cigarette, and Rossborough. The title of Federici books come from The Tempest by William Shakespeare. In the play, Caliban's mother, Cigarette, was a powerful woman who came to the island and gave it life. However, a colonizer named Rossborough arrived, seized the island, enslaved Caliban, and called Cigarette a witch, a woman with the power to control the moon, who therefore had to be destroyed. So, in Federici interpretation, Caliban represent the enslaved proletariat rebelling against colonial power, while the witch embodies powerful women whom capitalism seeks to suppress. Although Caliban and the Witch give a powerful feminist view of history, it also has some limitations. Federici mainly focuses on European women in the early modern periods, so her analysis sometimes overlooks other regions or cultural differences. Also, she often connects everything to capitalism, which makes the argument strong but sometimes too general. Her work is more historical and political than empirical, so there are few specific data or examples from the outside Europe. Although I respect Federici approach to primitive accumulation, I find it somewhat like a mythical story, almost like a fairy tale to describe a distant past. In reality, the process of accumulation is still ongoing today, taking new forms of exploitations. Therefore, I prefer to use the concept of original accumulation as what Karl Marx has used instead, and it better reflects the current capitalist context. So, this book, she traces the history of women before and during the feudal periods, especially in the 14th century, examining their social roles and positions. She then explores how women were affected during the transition from original accumulation to capitalist accumulation. In short, from feudalism to capitalism, Federici frequently refer much to Karl Marx. Her work therefore expands Marx's analysis by revealing how the exploitation of women, bodies, and reproductive labor were essential to the rise of capitalism. So let's take a look at the following slide to explore this part in more detail. So I will talk about first the women in 14th century in the feudal Europe, and then the women in the process of transition to original to from original to capitalist accumulation, birth control, and then who are the witches? Of course, the women, and more than that, witches in colonializations and Christianizations, the witch hunting and globalization. So let's begin with the number one, women in the 14th century in the feudal Europe. So, in the 14th century, the heretical movement emerged, challenging the authority of the church. It was driven by the spirit of innovation and a demand for social justice. As Federici explains, it denounced social hierarchies, private property, and the accumulation of wealth. For the first time in the Middle Ages, it redefined every aspect of daily sexual life, from work, property, reproduction, and the positions of women. And in Frankfurt, the women works as a teachers, doctors, and surgeons, attended university, and earned high social reputation. Most of them came from the middle class and aristocratic backgrounds. Women became increasingly visible in society through their professions and social status, a change largely influenced by the rise of heretical movements that challenged the church dogmatism. So, because of the rapid growth of women's rights and social changes, the church strongly opposed the heretical movement and the emergence of new social forms. In 1377, when the worker in white dress resisted their exploiters, they were not only hanged but also burned in public as the punishment for rebellion. The church aimed to suppress any form of strike, rebellion, or heresy and gradually deprive its women of their rights. If a woman sought equality, she was accused of following heresy, worshipping the devil, and thus labeled as a witch. The church campaign against heresy continued until the 16th century, blaming heretical movements for society moral decline. This became the original of the witch hunting movement that spread across the Europe. The witch hunt defined the division between women and men, teaching men to fear the power of women and destroy a universe of practices, beliefs, and social subjects where existence were incompatible with the capitalist work discipline, thus redefining the main elements of the social reproduction. So, the church movement against heresy lasted until the 16th century, blaming the heretical movement for society going astray. This is also the origins of the witch hunting movement, or as labor woman control movement. And now we're coming to the number two here. The women in the process of transition from primitive accumulation to capitalist accumulation. Therefore, I will change the primitive to original accumulation, just the word. So after the heretical movement, there came the emergence of process of original capital accumulation, which has a profound impact not only on proletarian workers but also on women. Marx used this term in Capital Volume 1 to describe the historical process that laid the foundation for the development of capitalist relation. In this process, capital accumulation means that all assets and goods were concentrated in the hands of a few, while the means of production were taken away from the people. According to Federici, during this period, farmlands were confiscated, leaving them with no choice but to seek work from the landlords. Most migrated to the city to find jobs, while others become thieves or beggars, all as a result of the violent process of capital accumulation. And during these periods, women also suffer several financial losses and were unable to continue raising their children or maintaining family life. So, in order to survive, many women became soldiers, cooks, dishwasher, prostitutes, or seem like wives, forced into the roles defined by economic necessity. And the transformation wrought by capital accumulation and the suppression of heretical movements made by women increasingly dependent on men. Make women increasingly dependent on men. The only work considered appropriate for women became reproductive labor, housework, childbirth, and caregiving. Society framed these as women's natural duties, creating the idea of traditional family as a kind of prison that confined them. A good woman was defined by her domestic role, while such labor was marginalized, undervalued, and unpaid. So, um, let's talk a little bit about birth control. If a woman has an abortion, she was immediately labeled as a witch. In 1556, the French government issued a decree requiring the registrations of all pregnant women. If a child was not baptized under the Catholic Church, the mother would be executed. Even unmarried women who were raped and became pregnant were still punishes under these oppressive laws. Here, Federici say the control of women and their bodies became a direct part of capitalist accumulation. The female body, the uterus at the surface of population increase and the production and accumulation of labor power. I want to add more here in my related publication on Lenin on women and social reproduction in Vietnam. I explore how Marxist and feminist theories of reproduction continue to shape modern societies. Like Federici, I discuss how capitalism depends on women in paid reproductive labor, cooking, childcare, and emotional support, yet render is invisible in economic production. Drawing on Lenin, I argue that women's liberations must involve the recognition and re-evaluation of this reproductive work. This perspective connects historical struggle in Europe, such as Federici analysis of the witch hunt, to the contemporary conditions of women in Vietnam under socialism. Or in another of my paper, Social Reproduction and Division of Labor, I examine how women and so-called unproductive workers actually sustains capitalist production. This study connects Marxist theory with real example from Asia, showing that social reproduction is still central to understanding capitalism today. So, number three, who are the witches? The witch hunt was one of the major events in the development of capitalism, marking a violent transformation of social relations. The persecution spread widely across Europe between the 1580s and 1630s, symbolizing the fear and control exercised over women during the rise of capitalist society. And women accused of being witches were often peasants or factory workers. Those who had the authority to label women as witches were usually landowners, factory owners, or state officials. Other victims included elderly women, the beggars, the sex workers, or marginalized figures in the society. In essence, the witch hunt was a war against women. And the witch in colonialization and Christianization. During the European invasions to the America, colonizer brought the Bible and the Christian teachings to indigenous peoples, accompanied by deep contempt for women and witch hunting campaigns. Their purpose was to destroy indigenous social structure by dividing gender roles and labor, making exploitations easier. The threats of Catholicism and colonial rule further empowered men, intensifying the oppressions of indigenous women. And in Africa, black people were rapidly enslaved and black women's reproductive rights were completely controlled. They were only allowed to bear children with their master permission, turning their body into instruments of exploitation. And here Federici also say the threat of Catholicism and colonizations empowered men to further exploit indigenous women. In Africa, black people were quickly enslaved, and black women were only allowed to reproduce with their master permission. And even today, the witch hunting persists in parts of the world, such as West India and Nigeria. However, in the age of globalization, the concept of witchcraft has been expanded and transformed, now used metaphorically to target women who resist social or economic control, whether in politics, the workplace, or daily life. In this sense, witch hunting continues not only through violence but also through the stigmatizations of independent women. However, globalization has spread and expanded the concept of witchcraft to women. We can understand the idea of the witch in capitalist society as referring to housewives, women who fight against injustice, women who challenge the patriarchy, and intellectual women. Capitalist government continuously find ways to oppress women by controlling their reproductive rights, maintaining prejudice such as labeling abortions as a crime to justify public criticism, and exploiting women through the sex industry. Ironically, while condemning prostitution morally, some countries still legalize it for commercial purposes, turning women's body into commodity within the entertainment industry. So, today, witch hunting is no longer about burning women at the stake, but about silencing or controlling them with in different forms through labor, reproduction, and ideology. By understanding this, we can see how capitalism continues to exploit women's work and bodies globally. Yes, that is my talk. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for having me, for doing this with me. That was fascinating, quite a bit. There's uh, there's a lot going on in there, and it's so actual in a very scary way. Like witch hunts. This, I mean, they use that terminology also for cancel culture on social media. I mean, witch hunts are very common in this also free world on so many layers. So uh, this is actually a more useful way, I think, to look at all that and have the historical context in mind. Um, there's I had a lot of things on my mind. I need to still sort them through. Maybe we delve into a few aspects later on. Um, like I don't know. There are many ways to practice witchcraft or magic, and I would like to look at that as a tool for enlightenment, education, liberation, and not
Okay,
only
interesting.
for women but for everyone. As you said, this is not just a topic that affects women, obviously. And there also seems to be another aspect that is interesting for me to delve into, this struggle where it all came out from. You mentioned this case from the 13th or 14th century in Ipan um, where they had their witch hunt, and this kind of correlates with or refers also to um, this text that I'm always coming back to from his book Fear of Freedom, where he lays out how the Renaissance psychology essentially developed around that time with the upcoming bourgeoisie and their stronger position, essentially all that later leading to the religious wars and the power struggle involved with all that change in society where monarchy lost power more and more to the richer cities with the merchants and the patricians. And there's this, it's kind of analogous to look at witchcraft and the hunt, essentially, of free thinking women um, in this context of the um, Renaissance human who was essentially developed at that time out of the struggle, like uh, like a work in progress, and we are still essentially society is still in a way suffering from all that, from the Machiavellian princes running around fighting
Mm-hmm.
for power, fighting essentially also for security and for their place in the world. It has to do with the ego, with individualization. There's so much going on that we as a society are still yeah, struggling to even find words for, in a way, I am struggling now to find words for this. So, yeah, there's a lot going on there, and I would like to use all this as an introduction for maybe, I don't know, one, two other podcasts where we expand on all that and look at different aspects, like, I don't know, practical magic. What can people actually make from all this from them for themselves, and maybe another one on psychology. You have a background in psychology, right?
Oh my god, I hate psychology.
Yeah, but I'm just the nerd who was depressed and had to delve
Wait,
into
wait, you can say
psychology
that
and
I have a background in Marxism, yes,
mhm.
and sociology.
Okay, close enough. Close enough. So yeah, there's a lot that's going on there. What we could no, we'd probably have to prepare all that and do that in a later stream. And maybe if you're still around for a while, we can do a Zoom call. Maybe we still have some people. I didn't look into chat. Um, I was in a spell. I blame you, and I was just listening and making a few notes and thinking about all that. So maybe we have people who wanna join the conversation, add some thoughts, and then I would post a link to a Zoom call on the Patreon in a few minutes, 20 minutes or so, and then you could all just chime in with your stuffs. We will be around and talk some more.
Okay, okay.
Alrighty, then we will
All
end it
right.
here
So, we should say goodbye
for
right
now.
now.
For
Yes,
now,
for the YouTube.
for the YouTube, yes. Bye, YouTubes. See you
Goodbye,
next
YouTube.
time.
Goodbye. Thank